Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast, working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
I'm a brutally honest person. What you see is what you get. I don't play games. So I'm telling him my problems, her problems, our problems, and Dara and I are on the same page. So for 45 minutes. So he takes his glasses off, puts them on his pad. He looks at me. He goes, "I can't believe you guys are still married." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "People get divorced for a fraction of what you guys have going on." He goes, "I honestly can't believe you're still married." I'm like, okay, that's all I needed to know, right? We're doing something right. So we never went to counseling again.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Doug, thank you for taking the time to do a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Thanks for having me, David.
You and your wife, Dara, have been married for 28 years and are the proud parents of 5 children: Taylor, 27, Dougie, 25, Jackson, 22, Peyton, 21, and Mia, 19. Both Dougie and Jackson are on the autism spectrum. Let's start with some background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
All right, born in Paterson, New Jersey. My dad was a cop there for 35 years. Mom was a nurse for the city physician for probably 25 years. And when I was 5 years old, we moved to Totowa, which was the next town over. And that's where I spent my childhood, going to Passaic Valley High School.
And did you have any siblings when you were growing up?
Older sister, 4 years older. Younger sister, 9 years younger.
So that's a pretty big age range.
Yeah. My parents like to say that she never was a mistake. She was just a little bit of a surprise.
I was talking to a rabbi in Israel the other day, and there was like a 16-year difference between the youngest and the next oldest. And I said, with all due respect, is that like an oops baby? He said he's in his 70s. He said, I said that once, and I've never been able to live that comment down. So now we just think of her as a blessing.
That's exactly right.
Right? Because all kids are blessings, right?
That's right. My wife and I were on a mission. So when we started having kids, we got married in 93. Taylor was born in 95. We're like, all right, we're going to have 5. So let's have 5 in 7.5 years. And that's how it worked out.
Yeah, well, not everybody can have kids. And the fact that they're sort of bunched together in a relatively short time frame, presents some challenges, but a lot of blessings.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned your dad was a police officer. I also remember in a prior conversation you mentioned that he held down more than one job. And what was the backstory on that?
So he went on the force in 66, the year I was born. And, I think he made $6,000 a year. I remember that number for some reason, but it wasn't enough to buy a house. So he was a pipe fitter. So he had a trade of being a pipe fitter, and he also delivered cleaning for his uncle who owned the cleaners. He delivered cleaning. He was a pipe fitter, and he was a full-time police officer in Paterson. And he did that in the beginning for the first couple of years. Then, as you know, there was a lot of riots going on in the late 60s, a lot of activity. So he didn't do those 2 jobs, but then he replaced the pipe fitting and the cleaning with side jobs, working security in banks and doing things like that. So he always worked full-time as a city cop, but he always had the side ones too. And basically he said this was the only way for me to save enough money to buy a house. Because when I was born, we were born on a second floor, 2-bedroom house. Just me and my sister shared it on Albion Ave in Paterson. And he wanted to get us out and get us into a house and get us into a town, which was Totowa. And he had to work 3 jobs to get it.
Yeah, what I hear you saying is that he has a very good work ethic.
Without question, yeah. 2 things that need to be kind of recognized is that, you sacrifice for your family, right? You sacrifice for your family. Why are we doing all this? You really take a breath and look at, why we work so hard, it's for our family. It's for us too. Don't make any mistake, but we really do it for our family. But it can come at a cost, right? And for my dad, I didn't get to see him that often. Growing up, I did not see him that often. He wasn't home. He was literally working almost 20 hours a day. He always found time to come to a game, not all of them, but come to a game and come to my events. And I always felt loved, but I just didn't see him that often. And then for me, the first 20 years of my career, I'm doing this almost 30 years now, I commuted from Jersey to the city. And, that's 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours, depending upon traffic. It could be an hour and a half to 2 going in, hour and a half to 2 coming out. And that's a lot of time that you miss with your family. So, I've always strived on trying to find balance in my life. I still haven't found it. But the way I always have my visual is a 3-legged stool. You have to have balance, your home life, your professional life. But then you have to have that third piece, that thing that you like to do. Could be fishing, right? Could be, I love to spend a lot of times outdoors. And if one leg on that 3rd-legged stool gets too long or too short, your life is out of balance. So, this point in my career, I'm finally the closest I am to being in balance, but I'm not there yet. And growing up, my dad was not in balance.
Yeah, well, thanks for pointing that out. It's really important. And your dad's still alive, right?
Yeah, both parents.
Which is a blessing. And I'm wondering, in addition to the making the sacrifices, having the good work ethic, if there's any important takeaways you've taken away from your dad, perhaps something you've tried to incorporate into your own parenting.
So my dad is a gentle giant kind of a guy. And he's always been, he was a weightlifter for many, many years. He's feeling the consequences of arthritis now because of that. But growing up, he was always the envy of a lot of other cops. So whenever I saw my dad around other cops, he was the guy whose arms were over 21 inches and the shirts just didn't fit, right? So he's 6 feet tall. He had a 56-inch chest and 21-inch arms, and he drew a lot of attention. So he was very modest. He was meek, which is a good quality to have. People think meekness is weakness, and it's absolutely not. But when you pressed his button, you didn't want him to erupt because he only did it once or twice in my life, and you learned not to do that. So he was kind of like that gentle giant. So I kind of got that from him. And then his work ethic, obviously, I got that from him as well. And just his attitude towards doing the right thing. I just always grew up with him knowing that he always did the right thing. Now, every kid probably says that about their dad, but it was actually very clear to me older in life when I was in high school, when his 3 best friends, his best friends that he went on the force with early on, were all basically caught doing things they shouldn't have done, working with organized crime. And my dad was not involved. He knew, I don't know if he knew what was going on, but he wasn't involved at all. He made the conscious decision to do the right thing and not be involved. Whether he knew about it or not, I really don't know. He doesn't talk about anything like that. But that really instilled in me that, my dad wasn't doing something he shouldn't have done, so he didn't get caught. So guess what? As long as you don't do anything wrong, you never have to worry about getting caught. So do the right thing, and you'll be okay. So that was a valuable lesson I got from him.
So my recollection was that you took a BA in political science from Montclair State, and you also played football in college. So when you graduated, what was your aspiration? Where do you think your career was going to take you?
So it's funny. I had a terrible academic career in high school because I didn't do my homework, and I was very easygoing, and my parents never checked my grades, and they never checked my homework, and I squeaked through high school, and my grades weren't good enough to go to college. So I went to night school at Montclair State, and I worked full-time construction during the day. I still figured I wanted to go to college, even though I wasn't really being pressed to go to college. I didn't really want to work construction the rest of my life. So I worked construction during the day, went to night school. I got my grades up, and then I got accepted into Montclair as a full-time student at the age in 1986. And then I started playing football because I was a pretty good football player. In high school, I was an all-area player. And then I really matured. I put on about 15 pounds of muscle every year in Montclair. And by my time my senior year, I was being recruited by some NFL scouts at 6'4", 305, pretty good on my feet. I was getting a lot of looks. So I was political science major. And football was never going to be an option for me, but it turned out that it was. So I played 2 years professionally. Right out of college, I was at a Giants camp very briefly for the length of a cup of coffee in 1990 and was released. And then I got recommended to play in the World League, which just started that year. So I played 2 years professionally, the World League in the spring and the arena football in the summer. So I got paid for playing for 4 teams, and that was the down payment on my first house.
Good for you.
I didn't get paid that much. It was like $4,000 a week, but I ended up playing for like 24 weeks straight for 2 years. So the math, it worked out pretty good.
Yeah, good for you. Well, you're a big guy, 6'4", at one point over 300 pounds.
Probably a lot more than that now, but unfortunately, I'm not back at fighting weight. I'm still above my fighting weight.
Okay, we're not going to go there tonight.
But, it's interesting, though. A good lesson that I learned was I knew football wasn't a long-term thing for me. I mean, I was hopeful, to play in the NFL, but I just wasn't mature enough. Coming from a small school, I wasn't mature enough. I needed more time. So I went to night school at Jersey City to get my BA in criminal justice. And I was over a year in the process with Secret Service. That's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be federal investigator, and I was over a year into the process, and I was probably 6 months away. I was doing really well, and when President Clinton took office, he actually slashed the budget of the Secret Service by $9 million. It went on a 2-year hiring freeze. I was 6 months away. So I was teaching and coaching football at Westwood High School in the fall, also going to night school in Jersey City for my criminal justice degree to help me get into the Secret Service, and I was playing professional football in the spring and the summer. So it was a busy 2 years in 91, 92, and I was getting married in 93. So I was hoping one of those things were going to work out for me. And it turns out I ended up going in a completely different direction. I didn't want to continue to play football. I was getting married. I wanted to start my family. So I went and basically got hired for the Equitable, an insurance company. And that was really my first kind of venture into the financial world.
Excellent. I'm sort of curious now, how did you and Dara meet?
So we met in 1984 in the Farrell Gymnasium of Passaic Valley High School. I remember walking into the gymnasium, seeing her talking to a mutual friend of ours named Brian. She was upset. I walked over. I started talking to her. I met her for the first time right there. I could walk to the spot. So we met in high school and pretty much got married 9 years later. And it's been fantastic. She's my first and only girlfriend. And I remember on my wedding video that I had converted over to a thumb drive, and I watched it. And I remember I said something. I said, I thank God for creating a girl that I'll never, ever leave. And I said that on my marriage day, September 19th in 93. And I feel the same way now.
That's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. So let's switch gears and talk about special needs first on a personal level and then beyond. So I'm sort of curious to know, before Dougie's diagnosis, did you or Dara have any exposure to the world of special needs?
No, none.
And how did his diagnosis come about?
So when Dougie was born, he had kind of typical behavior for the first year or so. And then, with the controversy going on now, especially with vaccines, the God's honest truth is that when he got vaccinated, he lost his vocabulary. He had about 300 words in his vocabulary, and within a couple of days, he lost his vocabulary. He went to gibberish talk for almost 2 years, and he didn't have seizures, and he didn't have any other significant repercussions from it, but we did see that change. And with Dara and I going to different charities over the years, we've seen and talked to other parents that had the same experience where, some of these kids went into full-blown seizures shortly after and had some pretty bad effects. And, after doing all the research and reading about it and reading about thimerosal as a preservative, and it was unregulated, and some batches had 4 times the amount versus the other batches. And, we chalk it up to them having a pretty high batch probably of this thimerosal in their vaccine. And they didn't have the ability to eliminate it throughout their body. So it settles on your organs, which is what it does. We spent $40,000 one year when they were older with chelation treatments, trying to remove the heavy metals from their body. They were both diagnosed with heavy metal toxicity. And the problem with chelation is that it removes it, but then it kind of moves around in the body and settles in other parts of the organ. So we tried that for a year, spent a lot of money that we really didn't have, and it changed the diets. We did so much to try to mitigate the impact, and it didn't really work. So our neighbor across the street was a doctor, behavioral sciences, and she's the one that basically said he's autistic. And my wife broke down almost at the time. This was, again, in the mid-'90s, like it's almost like a death sentence. And I refused to believe it. I'm like, they don't know that. There's no blood test that says it. But thank God my wife did the right thing, and Dara got him in the early intervention, and she did everything. And it took me probably 5 years to realize that they have special needs. And the one thing I would tell anybody who's listening to this, if they think they have, special needs child or someone that they know, you have to get that early intervention, because the sooner you get involved, it mitigates the effects down the road. You have to get involved. Don't worry about your kid being labeled. Don't worry about your kid going to school in a small bus. It's not about you. It's about the kid, and you got to get the kid the help that they need so that they can compete in the society. And the sooner you get it, the better. And we've known parents who refused because they didn't want that stigma. And unfortunately, their kids don't make the kind of progress that our kids have made. And it's very sad to see.
Yeah, well, great insight, and easy to talk about, but maybe, like you admitted, you weren't on that page, right, for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Right? It took you a while, and you're able to look back and say, if I could change something, it would be to embrace what Dara embraced. And thank God that she did, right, that she sought those early intervention services when she did.
That's right. But the other thing, too, is it did create a kind of a wedge between us, too, right? So because I didn't believe it, and because she took the lead, it created a wedge between us. And that's not good. And the other thing is that you have to be on board fully with your spouse. I mean, you guys both have to be all in. And if one of them's out and one of them's half in, it just doesn't work as well. You both really have to sit down, be mature about it, and say, listen, we do whatever we can for our kid. We sacrifice for our kid, but this kid needs more, right? So we really have to step it up, and we have to do it together. And unfortunately, I didn't do that in the beginning. It took a number of years before it did. And then once it did, finally we were on the same page. Things really got better since then.
Well, thanks for emphasizing that. So how did Jackson's diagnosis come about? Was it vaccine related or not?
Not so much. Jackson had a traumatic birth, and we don't know if it was that or not, but it could have been. He was a very big baby, right? Both my boys right now are 6'4", 250 pounds. So they're big adults, but they were also big babies. Jackson was big. Jackson was 9 pounds, 6 ounces, I think, something like that. And towards the end of the pregnancy, his umbilical cord was pinched. And every time Dara had a contraction, we would watch the heartbeat go from 140, 50 beats per minute. And the doctor and I would actually watch and hear the sound of the heartbeat go down to about 20, 25 beats per minute. So it was actually cutting off his oxygen. So the doctor basically said, his quote was, "This baby does not like contractions. We have to get this baby out." And she wasn't dilated enough, but we're watching, and it's a big problem. So he said, "Doug, you have to help me deliver this baby," right? God's honest truth. That's exactly what he said to me. There was no nurses. There was other deliveries going on. So it's my wife, the doctor, and myself in the room. And he says, "You got to help me deliver the baby." I'm like, "Tell me what I got to do." So he said, "Make a fist with your left hand, put it," and he placed it on her belly. "Take your right hand, put it behind her neck. When I tell you to push down, you need to push down as hard as you can." And I said, "Doc, I'm a pretty good guy, pretty big guy. I can push pretty hard." He goes, "I'm telling you to push." He was stuck. His shoulder was stuck behind the bone somewhere, and he wasn't coming out. He was actually being slowly suffocated. So she was at 9 centimeters, not 10. He said, "We got to start pushing." So I had my left fist on her belly, my right hand behind her neck. We're watching the contraction, and he said, you can see the contraction as it starts to ramp up, and he says, "Go." And I push hard down on my left. She's pushing. He's trying to turn the baby to get the shoulder to move. So it took, I think, the third time. We did that twice. Wait a minute. Did it again. And then the third time he turned the baby, so the shoulder came from out underneath. And then he was delivered. He said, Doug, if you were not here, we would have lost the baby, and it would have been very hard on your wife because there's not a nurse in this hospital that's strong enough to do what you did. He said, so the fact that you were there and you were strong enough to push this baby's shoulder behind while it was turning, you saved the baby's life. So Dara and I went to him about a year ago for her checkup. Every single time he looks me in the eye, Dr. Seidner, he's the best. He goes, you delivered that baby. He said, without you. So we think that because he was losing his oxygen there, we think that could have had a negative impact on his brain. But, we'll never know for sure.
Yeah, well, that is a very dramatic story. I've never heard a story like that before. Yeah. And it just gives me chills to think about it. I think some guys might have just fainted or, lost consciousness or something. I don't know. So thank you for sharing. That's amazing. Yeah.
You got to dig deep when you get that. And he is the coolest guy. Never sweats. Never. Dr. Seidner was just a really easygoing guy. He looked at me and his face was pale white and he was sweating. And he said, I need you to help me deliver this baby. And you don't even think of the consequences. It's like, okay, tell me what I got to do. And then, probably within 20 minutes, he was born.
That is wild. So now with the benefit of some hindsight, I'm wondering if you can look back and see as parents some of the important decisions you made on the boys' behalf as far as their personal and intellectual, emotional development.
The one thing that I learned is that, especially with 5 kids, obviously, every kid is different, right? So every kid is motivated different. You have to discipline every kid differently. Some things work with some kids and some things don't. And I think as a parent, you really need to know what works and what doesn't work. And if I can motivate one of my kids with a carrot versus a stick, right, the other kid is going to be exactly opposite, right? Some dog, to use an analogy that I heard with a coach, some dogs perform well when they get kicked and some dogs perform well when they get petted, right? And that's the truth. So all 5 of our kids are really different. And with the boys, I learned really early that they do not respond well to a loud voice. Forget about anything physical. We've never put our hands on our kids anyway. But if you even tried, their anger, their anxiety would get ramped up to a level so high, it would just really compound the experience. So we just learned to really back off and speak in low tones. Even when they're young, rolling around on the ground, screaming, we would just speak in low tones like, why are you doing that? You're embarrassing yourself. You're embarrassed. But you never get angry with them. You don't raise your voice. You don't grab them by the wrist. You don't jerk them. Sometimes I see parents do that. And the kids just don't react to that. Some do, but our boys didn't. So we really learned how to disengage with them in order to make progress. So again, it took a long time to do that as well. And then as they got older, for me, a big challenge was trying to connect with them because for me, I was always into athletics. And that's the farthest thing from anything that they want to do. They don't even want to, when they were younger, they didn't even want to throw a ball. Not even throw a Frisbee. So a big part of my life growing up was athletics. And I couldn't share that with my sons. And it took me a long time to get over myself, so to speak, and focus on them, right? So if they're into the train engine, Thomas the Train Engine, right? I couldn't tell you how I memorized that, Blue's Clues, all these television shows, trains, we would take them on train rides. So you have to get into their world. And I'm not talking grammar school, even, up into high school, going to certain movies. It wasn't about me. It wasn't about doing what I wanted to do. It was about how can I connect with my kid, right? And you got to figure that out. I didn't have anybody to, again, as a mentor would have been really helpful then, but I didn't. I had to figure it out on my own, and it probably took too long to figure it out. But eventually I got it, and now even today, I look for ways to connect with my boys in any way, right? Because when I took Dougie to Comic-Con a month or so ago, and he'll just talk nonstop about it. But typically I could be in the car with both of them, and it's complete silence. But if I start talking about something that he's interested in, he doesn't stop talking, right? So that windshield time that we have with our kids is so important, where we would ritual of going to church every Sunday and then talking about it before we go out to lunch. That windshield time is critical because you got your kids captured. And my 3 daughters as well. My three daughters are high achievers. All three of them are high achievers. But as they get older and as they get distracted and as they get their own phone, you don't have the time to spend with them either because they're busy doing their things. But when you get them in a car for an hour, driving out to Long Island for 2 hours, going to a volleyball tournament or going to a softball tournament, that was critical. And I learned that with my other girls as well, with my three girls, to really capitalize on the time because you have a captured audience. Take the earbuds out of your ears and let's have a conversation. So it's all about tapping into your kid.
Yeah, I think your point about everyone's different, right? They're not all motivated, or you can't discipline them the same way is really critical. And it's not just the difference between boys and girls, but meeting them where they're at, right? Finding out what their interests are, what turns them on, what motivates them. It's not a one size fits all, right? You'd think that, hey, same parents, same environment, same house. Obviously, birth order has a little bit to do with things, but kids are completely different. And coincidentally, we both have three girls and two boys.
All right. That's right.
I can relate to some of the comments you were making. And not to focus on the negative, but what were some of the bigger challenges that you and Dara faced? You already mentioned your denial, maybe some pride that got in the way early on when Dougie was younger. And you've already mentioned the challenge that you had to overcome to try to figure out how to connect with the boys. But I'm wondering if there's anything else, when you look back on it, some of the bigger hurdles that you faced.
There was a lot of years there when the boys were initially diagnosed and then really going up through grammar school and even into high school. Dara and I didn't see a lot of each other because I'd be in the city and I'd be at the bridge or the tunnel, by 6:45, and almost every night I'd be home after dinner and I'd come home exhausted. And she was busy. She had 5 kids, 2 with special needs. She was completely exhausted. So neither one of us were really kind of fulfilling either one's needs. We were just like 2 ships passing in the night. And that was a long time, unfortunately. That was way too long. That was probably, 10 years.
Wow.
And it really put a lot of strain on our marriage. If Dara and I if we didn't love each other as much as we did, we wouldn't have made it. And I remember we went to a Christian counselor right around that time, probably when the boys were in grammar school, because we weren't functioning. We weren't seeing each other. I was working 10 to 12-hour days. She was completely overwhelmed. We were both completely overwhelmed, and we both weren't really fulfilling each other in almost every way. So we go to this Christian counselor, and we're sitting there, and he's like, all right, who wants to start? So I look at Dara, and I said, do you want me to start? She goes, yeah. So I gave it to him straight for 45 minutes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And every time I talk, we look at Dara, and yeah, she's nodding her head. I'm a brutally honest person. What you see is what you get. I don't play games. So I'm telling him my problems, her problems, our problems, and Dara and I are on the same page. So for 45 minutes. So he takes his glasses off, puts them on his pad. He looks at me. He goes, I can't believe you guys are still married. I go, what do you mean? He goes, people get divorced for a fraction of what you guys have going on. He goes, I honestly can't believe you're still married. I'm like, okay, that's all I needed to know, right? We're doing something right. So we never went to counseling again. That was probably, 10 plus years ago. And then it kind of was a wake-up call for Dara and I. So then 7 years ago, I left the broker-dealer business, and I created my own RIA, created my own insurance agency, and I spent a lot more time at home. So I'll never forget this time I'm sitting on the couch, and Dara and I still have this, we've always had this kind of friction between us. And, God just put it on my heart. And I looked at her, grabbed her hand. I said, I just want to apologize. I said, I realized that, selfishly, for these last 10 years or so, I was thinking about how you weren't helping me, but now I finally realized that I wasn't helping you. So even though I was completely overwhelmed, I finally realized that you were completely overwhelmed. 5 kids, 2 special needs. I mean, she was maxed out. And I said, I wasn't there for you. And I just want to apologize for that. And she started crying and that's what she needed to hear, right? And it took me 10 years to say it, but she needed to hear it. And then when I said it, our relationship just blossomed from there, it was like putting water on a plant. And our marriage grew stronger and stronger and stronger. And right now, with 28 years of marriage, our marriage is stronger than it ever was because we're on the same page. And we acknowledge that our life is challenging, right? It's not me not supporting you or you not supporting me. We just have had a very challenging life. So there's no blame. Let's just come together as teammates and win, win for our family. And that's what we did. So, that's the other advice that I wish somebody told me a lot earlier, that it didn't take me so long to figure it out. But just you got to think about your spouse and what they're going through. Obviously, it's not just about us. It's about them. And when that finally clicked for me, our marriage just exploded for the upside since then.
Yeah, well, words of wisdom. Thank you for sharing. Which brings to mind, I'm sort of curious to know what Dougie and Jackson situations had on their siblings or your extended family for that matter.
So, we talked to the girls about this. Taylor, my oldest, she really helped raise the boys. Dara and I probably put too much on her because the boys were challenging and we were working so much. And here we have Taylor, who was very, very capable, and she helped us raise her two brothers, and she did a great job. And to this day, she's going to be a great mother someday. She's married 2 years, and I'm encouraging her to start having children as soon as possible because she'll be a great mother. But she always had that in her. She's a very caring person. So she really helped us raise them. But then in high school, when she got her driver's license, boom, she was gone. We didn't see her anymore. She's like, I put my time in. I am out of here. And that was it, right? So we got a lot of good years of her helping us raise the boys. And they have a really strong connection, both of them, with Taylor. So then Peyton and Mia are born after the boys. So it's a different dynamic, right? So now, listen, Jackson is loud. He's very loud. He lives life loud. He jumps, he yells, and he really lives loud. So my daughters wouldn't bring anybody over because there was an embarrassment there because, let's face it, a lot of people don't know what to do with that. So we didn't see a lot of their friends. But Peyton and Mia, they learned, even though they were younger, they learned how to take care of their brothers. So they have just this incredible personality. They're such giving people, low tone, well-grounded, high achievers in college, both of them, athletics, just really high achievers, but they're the most humble people you'll ever meet. I remember their friends used to ask, can Peyton sleep over? Can Mia sleep over? Because they were so good. They would, Peyton would do the dishes at somebody's house, after a sleepover or something like that. And Mia was just friends with everybody. So she would just mix in. So they're just really, I think, and it's probably a big reason because of the boys, they really learned how to humble themselves and take care of somebody. As a child, you're taking care of your older brothers, and they turned out into just incredible human beings because of it. And me as well. I'm a much better person having them in my life than not, because I probably would have been not such an understanding, patient guy. And my wife's probably laughing because I'm not that now, but I probably would have been 10 times worse, because you learn those lessons when you have special needs. You learn what to do, what not to do. You learn to control your emotions. We all have weaknesses and lose control once in a while, but we're all better, especially with Jackson, because he was really high maintenance. We're all much better people because of it.
So I'm sort of curious to know if there's been any particular organizations that have played an influential role, either on the boys' behalf or on your family's behalf, looking back on it.
So growing up, the boys did not play sports, but my girls always did. So I was pretty much very overwhelmed, because I was working 10 to 12 hour days in Dara. We really didn't have a lot of spare time. So the spare time that we did have, I spent with my kids. I coached all their teams when they were younger until they got too good. And then I still don't know volleyball. I still don't understand it. Softball, I understood. But in the early years when I was coaching, that was the time, that I had with them. And we didn't really have organizations that we participated in, we did charity events where we would meet other parents, and unfortunately, a lot of it were single moms where the dads felt too overwhelmed, and they end up leaving, the mother with the special needs kid. And I talked to some of these dads. Well, I support them financially. I'm like, boy, you're just missing it. Finances has nothing to do with it. You need to be there. You have to, kid needs a dad, and especially a special needs kid. The motherly love and the way a dad challenges, they're different, right? Mothers and right. This is not news, but like maybe to some people it is. Men and women are different, and that motherly love cannot be duplicated by anybody, including a father. But a father pushes their child, a father challenges their child. And that's the balance that I think every kid needs to grow up in a healthy environment. And when special needs kids need it more than a typical kid. So when you remove the father from it, and now you have the mother who's overwhelmed and just doesn't know how to challenge the kid, is more concerned about the nurturing, unfortunately, the kid probably doesn't develop as well as they should. So that's the one thing that I recognize with some of the charities that we did get involved with. There was a lot of single mothers. And I almost looked at that and said, you know what? I'm not going to be that guy. It won't happen. And God's honest truth, I thought about leaving. I did more than once. It never happened, but I thought about it. And that's when you really just got to dig deep, get on your knees and pray. And I pray awful lot. My faith is the most important thing in my life. And without that, I wouldn't have made it. I would have been gone. I would have been doing something else. It's my faith that grounds me. And without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. I know that for a fact. I'd be in a much, much worse place.
Thanks for emphasizing that point. A lot of people talk about the role of spirituality, but it plays a different role for everybody. And I've heard individuals say, without faith, how would you be able to shoulder some of the challenges or responsibilities of life, let alone raising a child, or in your case, children with special needs?
Yeah.
So let's switch gears and talk a little bit beyond your own personal experience. I'm really curious to know a little bit more about the backstory for the organization that you've created called Seat at the Table. What was the original vision and what's transpired since then?
So Brian Martin and I both, he still lives in Basking Ridge. I was in Basking Ridge for almost 20 years. We just moved to Long Valley earlier this year. So Brian and I are very close personal friends. Brian's background is in the athletic field, where he's trained professional athletes for many years. He works with physical therapists. He works with doctors. So he really does have such a broad knowledge and expertise that's truly unique. And he has two special needs boys, one with autism and one with CP. And it's very challenging for him and his wife, Melissa. And they do such an incredible job with their boys. It just, I don't have words to explain how strong they are in order to achieve in their own life, but still be there for their boys to the level that they are is absolutely incredible. So Brian and I were spending a lot of time together, and, his two boys and my two boys, and we just started brainstorming. And we says, listen, what if we come up with a charitable organization, a 501c3, and we basically will have some professional athletes, we'll do some engagements, we'll have some events, we'll do some fundraisers, we'll raise some money, and then we'll start giving out grants and, to families to try to help them, because there is a gap, right? There's a gap between what people can afford on their own, what the state is providing, right? Whether it's therapy or, whether it's putting up a swing set in someone's yard. We just wanted to create an organization where we could raise some money and start giving out grants. So that was the beginning of it. Seat at the Table is a name that I came up with. It's based on scripture. It's based on King David and his best friend Jonathan's son. Mephibosheth basically was handicapped, as it says in the Bible, in Samuel. So the quote from David is basically, where is Jonathan's son? Bring him to me. So Jonathan, the Bible talks about his ankles and his feet kind of being on backwards. So he was handicapped, and being handicapped, 2,000 years ago was not a good thing. You talk about a stigma today, imagine where it was back then. So he came to King David, came to the palace, and the quote from King David was that you will always have a seat at the table. you will always have a seat at the king's table. So you basically acknowledged you're handicapped. You're the son of my best friend. You will always have a seat at the table. So that's where we came up with the name. Turns out there's other organizations called that. So ours is a Seat at the Table Foundation. So that's the thing. We want to have all special needs kids to be challenged, to be part of society, to work if possible, to earn a paycheck if possible, to have a seat at the table, not to be off to the side, right? Not to be, relegated to doing something a lot less than what they're capable of, because these special needs kids can contribute. They can contribute to society in a lot of ways, not just working, but in a lot of ways. So a Seat at the Table Foundation was really designed to figure out how can we help these people contribute to society, because they want to contribute. They want to work. They want to be useful, right? Your heart, something in our heart when we're useful, we really feel good about ourselves. But when you have special needs, you have all these other challenges. Life is hard enough to go through, just normal as a typical person. Now you throw special needs on top of it. Think about the courage and the strength it takes to get through a day. If you have special needs and you know you have special needs and you're aware of it and you're self-conscious about it, think about the strength it takes to get through that day. So we wanted to create an organization that they'll have the same seat at the table as everybody else. They won't be discriminated against. They won't be looked down upon. We're going to challenge them and their skills as much as we would any typical person.
That's fabulous. I love the symbolism that goes along with the name and what it stands for. So what are some of the projects that you've either started or that you're planning on to engage these youth, to provide them with some of the life skills and some independence?
So Jackson goes to adult daycare, Spectrum 360 in Whippany. They're absolutely incredible organization. So once the child ages out from high school at 21, it's up to us to find a place for them to go to adult daycare. And they have just been an unbelievable organization. I think he's going to the Poconos this weekend. He went to a horseback dude ranch a couple of weeks ago. And the people are just absolutely incredible, right? Those of us with special needs know the teachers. These are special people. These are people that can spend all day with your kid, where I know for me, I couldn't do it. When they were younger, I could maybe spend an hour or two with my kid, then I'd have to tap out. It took me years to be able to spend a full day with them. These are teachers that are doing this for other people's kids, and they're doing it as a career, not because of the pay. They're doing it because they love it. It's a passion. So these people are absolutely incredible. So they take the special needs adults now, right, 21 and older, and they have to find places for them to go to get some work done. So Jackson was working at Jersey Mike's, basically taking out the garbage, cleaning up. He'll go to Burger King, clean trays for 2 hours. So that's how they get them involved in the community. So then I'm thinking to myself, well, what can they do? What kind of skills can a special needs person have? Autism, Down syndrome, CP, whatever it is. And the one thing that always resonated was shredding. Jackson loved to shred. So I would go through a lot of paper. I'd have a basket, and then he would just shred and shred and shred. And he was in charge of shredding at Ridge High School. That was his thing. He just loved to shred. So then talking to other parents, yeah, it's the strangest thing. Everybody loves to shred. So I'm like, well, how about inside of our foundation, we create a business of shredding? Well, what does that look like? Well, let's do on-site shredding. Let's buy a box truck. Let's buy a shredder. And let's give these adult daycare centers places to bring their people and shred. And guess what? We're going to pay them. So now we're going to give them a wage. So if we give them a wage, now they're going to get a paycheck, and now they can take their parents out for lunch, or they can buy a gift for their aide, or because they're out there, they're working, but now they're getting paid, and now they're getting a paycheck. And there's dignity in a paycheck. There's dignity in hard work and pride. And those are the kinds of things that we want to start to instill. We want to, listen, if they're out there volunteering, that's all well and good. They're helping the community. We want the special needs adults to get paid and to have a paycheck. So we came up with the name Shredding Special Needs. So Shredding Special Needs, I'm in the process now of getting the 501c3, which I should have shortly. And we're going to start doing on-site shredding. And because it's a 501c3, if we go to a law firm or a real estate firm, these places that use a lot of paper, and they hire our company, it'll actually be a deduction for them. So they'll be able to hire shredding special needs. We'll pull up, we'll do on-site shredding. We'll have a closed circuit camera. So if it's, for example, if it's law office, obviously these are very, very sensitive documents, so they can monitor everything that's going on. Everything will be done, above par, everything. It'll be a really good service, but you'll be helping the special needs community because the proceeds and the funds that we make, we're going to fold back into the employees, and we're going to make donations to the adult daycare center, and it's a tax deduction for the company to you. So listen, we're not looking to shatter any big records here. We're just looking maybe to compete for a portion of a firm's business where if they have somebody that they use now and they really like it and they do a good job, maybe we can do a small job for you, and we'll pull the truck right up on site. We'll do it right on site, and we're going to do a great job. So I'm really excited for this because we're going to really start to integrate the work ethic and the reward system with everybody in these adult daycare centers.
I love the concept. We'll have to circle back a couple years down the road and do a check-in. So Iron Mountain, Pro Shred it. You heard it here first. Beware. Shredding special needs is, biting at your coattails.
It's so funny, too. My wife and I were just away, and I met actually for the second time, I met a guy in my business. It was a business thing, and he's in Tampa, and his wife is with this law firm for 31 years. And we're talking at the pool, and we're talking about this, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, this is fantastic. Can you come down to Tampa?" I'm like, "Well, it's a business model. We got to get it going in New Jersey and New York first." But I said, it's a model that we definitely can bring to other cities. I says, "Why? How much shredding do you do?" She goes, "We spend $7,000 to $9,000 a month in shredding." She works for a very large firm. So I said, you know what? Maybe we'll do an offsite in Tampa sooner than later.
Yeah, you could just try it for spring break, right?
Yeah,
just do a shredding project.
I'll drive the box truck down.
Right. I mean, kids go on an alternative spring break, like for Habitat for Humanity and projects like that. And, they get a number of different things from that experience, right? They're doing something purposeful, which is what you're describing.
Yeah.
And they're also getting to travel and do things that typical kids get to do for spring break and things like that. So
that's a great idea. And you know what? I'm going to work on that and say, for a month in the spring, if we can carve that off, that's a great idea, David. Thank you.
Well, let's switch gears, talk a little bit about advice before we wrap up. I'm wondering if there's any advice beyond what we've already discussed that you might be able to share specifically with parents or dads in particular that are raising a child with special abilities.
Well, it's funny because, people who are getting married, a lot of times they ask you, what's the secret? Because it's no secret that my wife and I have a really strong marriage. We really do, It's not just a Facebook act. We really do love each other. And so people ask, and I thought about it, and it's actually a couple of things, what makes it work. And the one thing that makes it work is sacrifice. Right? If you're not willing to sacrifice, then it won't work. So you have to put your family before yourself. And that's easier said than done.
I love it. Thank you for sharing or emphasizing the importance of sacrifice. So I'm sort of curious to know, why is it that you've agreed to be a mentor father as part of the Special Fathers Network?
Because I struggled so many years. I was on an island, and I didn't have mentors in my life. And I think if I did, I probably could have came to some of these realizations a lot sooner than I did. I mean, my wife and I and our family struggled because we were overwhelmed, and it didn't have to be that way. It really did not have to be that way. And somebody that went through it that could have gave me some perspective and said, you know what, Doug, this is a chapter in your life. It's not always going to be like this, right? Life is seasonal, right? We're going to go through winters, but then we're going to have springs and we're going to have summers. So no matter how hard you think you have it, it's never going to stay that way. It's always going to change. All our lives are seasonal.
So is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up?
Well, I would say, I talk to my kids about this. Our brain, we can control our thoughts, right? And if we start having negative thoughts about whatever it is, we have to consciously control our thoughts. And we can control our thoughts because if we thinking about certain things, good or bad, these ruts, these brain passageways in our brain, it becomes very hard to break, good or bad, right? Good habit or bad habit. So if you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing, really work on changing your mindset, because as your brain goes, your life tends to go. So if you can recognize that and say, listen, I'm not in a good place when I'm thinking about, I shouldn't be thinking about these things. You got to really work hard and change your mindset, and then change your mindset to something that's more productive, again, in a sacrificial way. And it took me a long time to figure that one out as well, because you can control your thoughts. You can control your mind, and you want to focus on those good things. And you got to have that one thing in your life that you can always rely on. For me, it's my faith. It's the bedrock. It's, I tell my wife, no offense, but God's number one in my life. You're a close number two, and my kids are right there too, and my family and friends. But that's something that can never be taken away from me. So no matter how hard it gets, I know that I feel God's love in my life all day long, and I have that to rely on. So everything else doesn't really seem too hard. Jackson had cancer at 14 years old, which was an extremely challenging time for us. And without the power of prayer, I don't know how I would have gotten through that. And thank God, he's completely healed now. He had a germ cell tumor, but we could have lost him. And when your kid is on the spectrum is one thing, but when you're in a hospital and a kid's cancer ward and you're seeing all these children, and the reality is that maybe 50% of them aren't going to make it, it really puts things in perspective. And for me, once I got through that, there's nothing that's going to shake me in my job, in my career, in my friends. It just doesn't shake me, because that is something that shook me down to my core and almost broke me. And the fact that he healed and his chemo was intense because it spread to the lymph nodes, but we caught it in time. That was a complete game changer for me. Now, hopefully nobody has to go through that, but it almost took that realization to shake me out of it. I've been on mission trips. I've done clean water trips in Nicaragua. That as well, when you see what people are going through, you get outside of yourself, you see what's going on out there, and you just realize, holy cow, I am blessed so much more than I deserve. What the heck am I complaining about? So those kind of life experiences put things in perspective for me, and I draw on that for strength today.
Well, thanks for sharing. That is rather dramatic to have a 14-year-old son with autism to go through a cancer diagnosis and treatment. So let's give a special shout out to Brian Martin, Special Fathers Network, Dad to Dad podcast, dad number 164, for helping connect us.
Yes, thank you, Brian. Love you, brother.
If somebody wants to learn more about a seat at the table or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
My mobile number is 908 area code 399-6162. And my email is my name, Doug Robb, DOUGROBB 78 @gmail.com.
Excellent. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes. Doug, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Doug is just one of the individuals who's part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Doug, thanks again.
Thank you, David. God bless.
And thank you for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children match up with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support other dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Also, please be sure to register for the Special Fathers Network bi-weekly Zoom calls held on the first and third Tuesdays of every month. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast was produced by me, Tom Couch. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.